So who would win between David Corenswet Superman and Henry Cavill Superman? This is a topic that a lot of DC fans have been going over since the release of Superman 2025 and the showcase of David Corenswet's power in that movie. And with this take of Superman being a more lighthearted approach, very in line with the character's roots, you have a lot of people going with the notion that he's weak because of the fact that he holds back a lot in his first film. But what if I told you, even with him holding back massively throughout this film and never being at his true potential because of his injuries, he's still very easily one of the strongest live-action Supermen that we've gotten. Arguably even stronger than Henry Cavill Superman, who a lot of people compare him to. So in this video, I'll be breaking down the truth about DCU Superman versus DCEU Superman and finding out who actually wins. But very quickly before we get into the video, if you guys enjoy the content, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Also hit that hype button if you have the feature available. Starting things off with the low-end feats, or at least the low-end feats for Superman tier characters. Both of these Supermen showcase the ability to lift very large buildings with ease. In Justice League 2017, we see that Henry Cavill is able to easily do it towards the end of the film. And in Superman 2025, we see that David Corenswet Superman is able to easily do it as well when saving the life of a woman trying to cross the bridge. Now, I just want to clarify that for the low-end feats, I'm not really going to get into the specifics of everything. So even though Henry Cavill is like obviously flying with the building and David Corenswet is lifting a much larger building, because of the fact that these feats are pretty much inconsequential in terms of who wins this matchup, they aren't really worth spending that much time on, but I'm just showcasing them so that we establish a form of relativity between the characters before we get into the higher end stuff that actually determines who would win. But again, just for consistency of relativity, we have Henry Cavill before even donning the Superman suit, temporarily holding up an oil rig. And then we have David Corenswet Superman with ease lifting an 18 million pound kaiju. And we actually know that this kaiju was over 18 million pounds because of the fact that when the Justice Gang encountered the kaiju and started to fight it, Mr. Terrific obviously used his T-spheres to scan it. And if you look very closely, we can actually see the height and weight of this kaiju. As far as their travel and or flight speed, both characters showcase that they can easily break the sound barrier. We see David Corenswet do it within the first 10 minutes of his film. And obviously we see Henry Cavill do it literally every time he takes off for flight. So at low ball, both of these characters are obviously faster than sound. And at the low end, again, this just establishes a consistency of relativity. Now let's get into the feats and showings that actually are consequential to who wins this matchup. Starting off with Henry Cavill Superman. Now the one thing that Henry Cavill Superman does have over David Corenswet Superman is the fact that he just has appeared more so far. So naturally, by extension of that, he's going to have more interactions with other characters and more lines of inverse scaling. For example, Henry Cavill Superman was just blatantly showcased to be above the Justice League. And that team obviously included Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, Cyborg, and Batman. And this superiority wasn't just showcased in his actual fight with the Justice League, but also in his fight with Steppenwolf, because prior to him showing up, the Justice League couldn't really defeat Steppenwolf, and Superman was essentially the deciding factor of that fight. Now, how does David Corenswet Superman fare against everything that I just said? Well, despite actually having significantly less appearances than Henry Cavill, he pretty much has the same inverse in comparison to the other characters. And that's because this movie tells us like 30 times that David Corenswet Superman is the most powerful metahuman of all time. And because of statements from James Gunn, who is obviously the creator of this material, we also know that other heroes and villains exist in this universe, and that would include the entire Justice League lineup that already existed on Henry Cavill's team, minus maybe Cyborg. However, Cyborg probably does exist, or James Gunn at least has foreknowledge of Cyborg existing because of the fact that we were literally getting a Teen Titans movie, and the only reason why that movie isn't going forward right now is because the scriptwriter paused that script to write the Wonder Woman movie. So she's definitely going to return to it, and we probably still are getting that film. With that being said, I think it's also important to add this inverse is supported a lot throughout the movie because of the fact that in the opening moments, along with them telling us that Superman is the most powerful metahuman, they also tell us that he hasn't lost a fight, and he's been active for 3 years at this point. So in 3 years, he hasn't lost a fight up until now, and the person he lost to was a clone of himself. Now, the main point of contention with this is probably going to be, well, we don't know if the DCU Justice League characters are going to be equally as powerful as the DCEU Justice League characters. And while that's 100% true, what we do know is that the DCEU Justice League characters are for sure below Henry Cavill Superman. And if we look at their feats individually, they're not really that much more impressive than the low-end feats that I showcased for David Corenswet Superman and Henry Cavill Superman. In fact, the only Justice Leaguer from the DCEU that has any feats that's really worth mentioning for this battle is going to be The Flash. Flash. However, as the video goes on, you'll see why even that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Moving on from that, we'll now get into the more impressive showcases from both DCU Superman and DCEU Superman, starting with DCEU Superman. In Man of Steel, Henry Cavill's best feat is obviously him defeating the World Engine. And this is because of the fact that he was able to overcome gravitational forces that were going to be strong enough to eventually terraform the Earth and turn it into a new Krypton. At face value, a lot of people hear this feat and automatically assume that this is a planetary level feat, not only for his strength and AP, but also his durability because of the fact that he withstood it. However, the reason why this isn't planetary is because of the fact that this wasn't something that was going to instantly terraform the Earth with the amount of force that it produced. It was something that was going to happen over time. And if we look at pretty much any tiering system, the definition of planetary means to be able to create or destroy a planet with one attack, not a continuous attack that would over time terraform the Earth. So when looking at it with this context, at best you could say that this is like a large continental feat. And that would also be consistent for DCEU Superman's strength because of the fact that in BVS we also find a statement that he actually was able to shift a tectonic plate and prevent an earthquake, which would actually be stronger than large continent level. Now we move to a feat that is probably DCEU Superman's best quantifiable strength feat, and that is when he helped Cyborg split the Unity. And this feat would actually qualify as planetary because of the fact that the Unity essentially would have not only instantly eradicate all life on Earth, but it also would have instantly reshaped the entirety of Earth's matter at the molecular level. The only problem with this feat, however, is the fact that he did it with the help of Cyborg. Now, obviously you could argue that Superman is massively above Cyborg when it comes to physical lifting strength, so you could obviously attribute more of the feat to him, but even still, because of the fact that he has help, we don't know the quantifiable degree at which this is planetary. But just for the sake of the video, let's assume that this is DCEU Superman's planetary feat. In the grand scheme of things, David Corenswet still has a relative scale. And this scale obviously stems from the statement of him being the most powerful metahuman of all time, and also because of the fact that in the Blue Beetle movie, which came out post-Flash 2023, which was actually supposed to be the reset button for the DCEU turning into the DCU, and Blue Beetle is objectively canon to the DCU because of the fact that we know and Blue Beetle is in fact returning from that movie. And his next project in the DCU, which is set to be an animated series, is basically going to follow the events of what happened in that movie. We actually see the Scarab en route to Earth, and on its path to Earth, we actually see it destroy a planet. And the full power of this weapon is now in the possession of Jaime Reyes, who again would fall under the metahumans that Superman is above because of the fact that Superman is again stated to be the most powerful of them all. So again, with just elite world building and statements, David Corenswet Superman is already planetary. Now obviously you could point out that we don't know the specifics of this planet because of the fact we don't know the size, but the same way you can do that is the same way I could point out that Cyborg did in fact help Henry Cavill Superman with his feat. So again, for the sake of the video, we'll just get both characters to planetary. So at this point, you're probably wondering, what is it that's going to be the separating factor between these two characters? And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be the quality of showings that David Corenswet showcased throughout his film, while the whole time being under 83%. Or on the brink of death. Just to clarify very quickly, we know he was at 83% the whole film because in the very beginning when he gets healed by the sun, they say that he's only at 83%. And then as the film progresses, he just continuously gets beat up by his clone. And then he gets captured in prison and kryptonite poisoned until he's basically gonna die. And is then brought back to what I would say is only about 25% health because of the little sun amp that Metamorpho was able to give him. But then even after that, he still needed a full night's rest to recover. And when he wakes up, we still don't even know if he's at 100%. With that being said, let's get into David Corenswet Superman's best feat, and that is obviously him resisting the pull of a black hole with only his super breath. Again, while operating at probably 25% health. Now, to actually get into the specifics of this feat, we obviously have to analyze the structure of a black hole. And for some reason, a lot of people like to try and lowball this feat to try and make it seem like David Corenswet Superman is like this weak version of Superman, and that's just not the case at all. But to actually break this down, what we're going to want to pay attention to is going to be the accretion disk and the event horizon of a black hole. Starting with the accretion disk is essentially a disk of superheated gas and dust that swirls around the black hole at immense speed. So essentially that rainbow looking ring that you see around the black in this black hole feat. Now the event horizon is the radius around the singularity where matter and energy can no longer escape. So essentially the point of no return. This is important because not even light can escape this point. So stars, solar masses, none of that is able to escape any event horizon of any black hole. And if you look at any black hole diagram, the event horizon is past the accretion disk and essentially the black of the black hole. Here's just a quick display of multiple black hole diagrams so you guys can see the overwhelming amount of consistency with this. But now that we have that established, this is important to David Corenswet Superman's feat because of the fact that we quite literally see him go past the accretion disk and start to get sucked into the event horizon of the black hole he escapes from. And at this point, I'll be showcasing the clips and screenshots from the actual scene itself so that you guys can see a visualization of what I'm talking about. But at this point, in order for David Corenswet's Superman to escape this, he would have to be not only faster than light, but also strong enough to overcome the force of the black hole at this point. And I'm sure you guys are wondering how powerful you would have to be to actually overcome that, and the answer might shock you. You would quite literally need to have an infinite amount of strength to be able to pull yourself out of the event horizon of a black hole. This is because of the fact that in real life, the speed of light is essentially the largest quantifiable metric of speed or energy that we actually have. So anything beyond that would literally just be infinite in real life terms. Because of the fact that not even light can escape a black hole, this inherently would put you beyond that level. And this isn't something that's extremely far-fetched for Superman, because in the source material, Superman does have displays of infinite strength, and it's actually pretty consistent for his character. So when taking all of this into account, not only does David Corenswet's Superman gap Henry Cavill's Superman in terms of strength, durability, speed, and attack potency, he also again only did this with his super breath while at 25% health, meaning that he wasn't anywhere near the full potential that he possesses. And in this DCU that's going to be fully embracing the fantastical, where we literally have 5D imps just casually spawning on the Earth, this makes sense for Superman to be that strong. Now let's address some of the obvious contentions that people are going to have with this black hole feat. First contention being, Superman himself says that he won't be able to escape if they get to the event horizon. And while this is true, I would say that this doesn't definitively mean that Superman himself isn't capable of escaping. And it's more likely that this was actually Superman just doubting his ability to be able to get out because of the fact that he's severely weakened at this point in time, which would actually just add to the scene because of the fact that he realizes he's the last hope and he has to dig deep in order to save everyone. Which brings me to the next contention, which is probably, oh, but he had help from Metamorpho. Metamorpho tried to pull him out. And while that's true, if you actually look closely, as they get to the event horizon, Metamorpho gets completely overwhelmed by the force of the event horizon, which literally leaves it completely up to Superman and Superman alone to save them. And the third and final contention that I hear a lot of people say is, oh, well, if this was a true black hole, why isn't Metamorpho, Baby Joey, and Crypto completely ripped to shreds? And to that, I'd say this is where the fictional aspect of it comes into play. And before you write off what I'm saying, just hear me out. First things first, if we look at the source material in which this is based off of, Crypto the Superdog and Metamorpho are incredibly powerful characters who have relativistic scaling to what they have in the movie, if not better. So with that taken into account, it's very possible that they would just be able to survive because of their physiology. But the real answer is the laws of physics in fiction aren't always one-to-one with the laws of physics in real life. And because of this, we can only apply real-life physics to fictional settings in the context in which those fictional settings don't blatantly contradict those real-world physics. So for example, if we see Superman lift a car, we would just assume that that car weighs the same as an average car would weigh in real life. But if said fictional setting showcases or tells us that this car is actually a lot heavier or a lot lighter than the average car in real life, we can no longer use that as a metric. And this is why in DC Comics you can get instances where Superman is able to punch a character so hard it's enough force to destroy a small planet. However, the Earth itself is physically unharmed. Or another instance where Superman gets hit with a repulsion flow of 100 galaxies, and again, the planet that he is standing on is unaffected. This same logic can be applied to Marvel Comics as well, because we've seen things like a moon-splitting Mjolnir, which is verbatim stated by the narrator, hit the Earth and nothing happened to the planet, but the characters in the surrounding area were affected by this. However, if something hit the Earth with enough force to split the moon in real life, all life on Earth would literally be eradicated. And this sort of ties into the differences between attack potency and destructive capability, which is inherently controversial in itself, at least to people who don't like power scaling, but that is just the nature of the beast. And that is why in Superman movies, when we see Superman flying at Mach speed to save someone, he doesn't incinerate their entire body on impact. But now that I've explained why the black hole feat is essentially valid for DCU Superman, let's explain why Henry Cavill's Superman doesn't really have anything to match it. First things first, people will try to point to instances in Man of Steel where he's actually able to escape something that performs like a black hole. And for the sake of the argument, let's just say that this is in fact a black hole. The difference is he's obviously nowhere near as close as David Corenswet was to his black hole, and it's obviously just objectively smaller, meaning that it wouldn't have the exact same amount of tidal force as David Corenswet. But even if we did say for some reason that the tidal forces were greater on Henry's black hole, it still wouldn't matter because he came nowhere near the event horizon in which the black hole is at its absolute strongest, at least before the literal singularity. The next point people will try to bring up in defense for Henry Cavill is obviously his relativity to the Flash and speed. And the reason why this doesn't matter is because it's completely unquantifiable. And that's because objectively we know that the Flash wasn't moving anywhere near the speed of light. And he actually tells us before he time travels that he has to break his rule, which implies that it's something that he doesn't typically do. So at best you could argue that this is massively above hypersonic because of the fact that he's statuing Wonder Woman, who has easily showcased the ability to react to multiple bullets. But when you take into account that David Corenswet Superman is literally able to not only turn around, also reach out and grab Crypto the Superdog while at the event horizon of a black hole, it's pretty pointless to bring up. I also think it's noteworthy to mention that Superman struggling with Ultraman in the beginning and Lex Luthor being able to predict his movements and call them out doesn't necessarily downscale Superman's speed for a multitude of reasons. Reason number one is that we just know this Superman massively holds back, because in the two situations where he was actually on the brink of death, he just easily surpassed his limits. Exhibit A would obviously be the black hole feat, and Exhibit B would be when he was fighting Ultraman and the Engineer, and they attempted to fill his lungs with nanites, and he was literally tanking Ultraman's attacks, while simultaneously being suffocated and resisting the pull of both Engineer and Ultraman trying to slow him down. And the next reason is, they straight up tell us that Luthor is only doing this because he's predicting what Superman is doing before he does it and has the accurate counter ready. So he's not outreacting Superman at all. And then there's the other durability feats like Henry Cavill Superman surviving a city level nuke, which is impressive, but again just pales in comparison to the black hole feat. And David Corenswet Superman also bathed in antimatter. Or an anti-proton river, I should say, which effectively is just antimatter. And as for the Raptors that were also able to survive in this, you could just argue that Lex Luthor, who literally recreated the Big Bang in this universe, is just smart enough to supply his men with armor that can survive the conditions of the pocket universe that he created. And ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, that is the reason why I believe that David Corenswet Superman would actually defeat Henry Cavill Superman with relative ease if they were to ever come to blows. And I'm sure a certain subset of people are going to hate me for saying this, but that just is what it is. Obviously, if Henry Cavill were to somehow return in a Crisis on Infinite Earth story in the DCU and fight David Corenswet Superman, they wouldn't make it a one-shot battle for David Corenswet Superman because they would want to appease the fans. But as it stands right now, based off of the feats that were presented from both characters, David Corenswet Superman is just superior. And that's going to wrap up this video, ladies and gentlemen. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Also hit that hype button if you have the feature available. And as always, it's been K the God.